Today we're going to do our iOS 11 recap. This is one of the videos I had promised this week. The other video on the iOS 9 support drop, that's going to be coming later today, or possibly tomorrow. Depends on what I want to do, but I'm hoping it's going to be later today. So, by the way, when I'm doing this recap, I don't necessarily remember everything. So if I do miss anything, please leave it down in the comments below. And I will try and talk briefly about them on the iOS 9 video. So without further ado, let's get started. So first, we're going to start with iOS 11.0, which came out on September 19th of 2017. From what I remember, I didn't enjoy much of 11.0, because I didn't have a phone that could support iOS 11 at the time, because Apple had dropped support for the iPhone 5 and iPhone 5C, making the iOS 11 a 64 only OS. I mean, 64-bit only OS, meaning it can only run on 64-bit devices. That's the 5S and later. And it can only run 64-bit apps. I would say when I got my iPhone 6, though, 11.0 was already installed. As far as I'm concerned, I was able to experience 11.0 a bit until I had to update to 11.0.1. I would say 11.0.1 is actually the update that my iPad skipped. My iPad went from 11.0.0 to 11.0.2, but there was much really difference in 11.0.1, except for maybe a few bug fixes that were really unrelated to the phone I was using. So, 11.0, I'd say was great. It had screen recording and a few new voices. I would say it had a new Siri voice for the iPhone, and I believe iPod. The iPad never received the new Siri voice until 11.2, which I'll mention later. So on to 11.1. The update with 11.1 was that there were 70 plus new emojis. And I remember updating to the software, going through the emojis, and I'm like, wow, like, look at all these emojis. I was like, wow, look at all these emojis, and look at all these new emojis in my favorite category. Like, I just remember seeing, like, a whole bunch of new emojis, and it was good. 11.1 was good. The trouble started on 11.1.1. I don't remember there being 11.1.2, but that could be me just not remembering stuff off the top of my head. But what I do remember was, this happened in December, by the way. This happened in December 1st, or December 2nd, for a few of you. On 11.1, there was a bug, a really huge bug, or malware, which basically caused your device to respring, like not every device, but your iPhone. It basically caused your iPhone to go into this boot loop. So it would crash at 12:15 in the morning. It would crash, and it would respring, and it would do that multiple times. Like, it would respring over and over and over, and it was a boot loop glitch. Now, Apple had still been doing iOS 11.2 beta, which I can't remember what their beta at the time was. I believe it was beta 2 or 3, but I don't exactly remember. But anyway, they had to release 11.2 early. Like, extremely, like, I would say weeks early. Simply because of that boot loop glitch that happened on iOS 11.1, affecting iPhone 5S and later. So it was a pretty bad glitch, and Apple had to release 11.2 early because of that. In terms of 11.2, I don't really remember any new features off the top of my head that came with 11.2. What I did find confusing, though, was the fact that they did a beta of iOS 11.2.5, which was so weird, or at least in my understanding was really weird. Doing a beta of iOS 11.2.5 just didn't make sense to me. I think what really didn't make sense was the fact that they did 11.2.1 and 2, but they skipped 3 and 4 and went from 11.2.2 to 11.2.5. That part made it even stranger. When iOS 11.2.5 was out, this is where my controversy on the iPod Touch video kind of relates to this. Apple nearly dropped support for the iPod Touch 6th generation. They were planning on, I think their initial plan was to discontinue the iPod Touch 6 on 11.2.5. I believe that was their decision. But Apple later changed their mind as they were releasing iOS 11.2.6. Apple decided that they would continue support for the iPod Touch 6. So that was a good news. And so iPod Touch 6, as of now, will support up to iOS 12. I don't know if it will support up to 13. I have a feeling it will, considering the fact that it has an A8 processor like the iPhone 6. But we will see about that one. I do have a feeling it might support up to iOS 13. What else? So, but however, though, the iPod Touch 6 did not support iOS 11.2.6, and there was a text message bug on iOS 11.2.5, which iPod users still had, simply because you couldn't update to 11.2.6 on your iPod Touch 6th generation. So, I think the most exciting part of this recap goes into iOS 11.3. Again, the iPod Touch 6, Apple decided to keep support, so they didn't drop support. But iOS 11.3, I would say the main thing I liked about iOS 11.3 was the battery life, or the battery health in settings, and the new volume sounds, which originated from the Mac. I will say there were rumors in iOS 11.3 that group FaceTime was going to be a thing, but apparently that never happened. And according to and that never happened. So group FaceTime was not really a thing on iOS 11.3. But what I liked as an iPhone user on iOS 11.3 was battery health. For the iPhone, which by the way is on iPhone 6 and later. So if you have an iPhone 5S, you do not know what I'm talking about. Well, you might know what I'm talking about, but not really, because the iPhone 5S never supported that. But on the iPhone 6 and later, there's a thing in settings called battery health. Most of you are aware of it. And what I didn't know was when you had sounds on VoiceOver, there were new volume sounds, which I had never really heard about, they were originally from the Mac. By the way, going back to the topic of 11.2, I mentioned the new Siri voice in iOS 11 that came into effect on the iPad on 11.2. I am guessing, yeah. Correct me in the comments. 11.3.1, I'd say wasn't that much of a difference. And then I don't really remember. I don't really know. I don't think there was much different on 11.3.1. Like those kinds of updates, you never really expect much. So, wrapping up my recap with iOS 11.4, that's when Apple started iOS 12 beta. So my iPad is still on iOS 11.4.1, but I never got to update my phone to 4.1. So I never updated my phone to 4.1. I just went from 4.0 straight to the 12 beta. By the way, iOS 12 Goldmaster should be out sometime next month. Considering the fact that today, as of right now, it's August 31st. Goldmaster should be around September, and that's when I'm removing my beta profile off my phone. But my iPad's still in 11.4.1, and most of you are using 11.4.1. A few of you might be on iOS 12 beta right now. Public beta 10 is out. But that basically wraps up my recap. So iOS 11, I'd say, according to some of my viewers, iOS 11, I'd say, was a pretty buggy software, considering the fact that you had a glitch where it would go into a boot cycle, which would have been terrifying. Like, I was terrified when I first heard of that. It was such a terrifying experience. I had to do something. So, I am hoping that we do expect some stuff on iOS 12. There is no way you can go through a software without any bugs. But we should expect a little bit more improvement as iOS 12 comes along. And hopefully, yes, we're going to have bugs. Like I said, you cannot, like, no one is perfect. Like, even Apple isn't perfect. You cannot create a software 100% the way you want it to. You're going, like, those bugs technically are mistakes. Apple makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. And those bugs are simply mistakes. And if we kind of figure them out, address them, we know later those bugs are going to be fixed. So Apple is not perfect with their software, and we shouldn't be expecting them to be perfect, because the truth is you can't be perfect. Like, you cannot, even though you try to make it the best you can, there's no guarantee that you're going to be 100% perfect or satisfied of what you're running. So I would say with iOS 12, we should expect a little bit more better performance considering speed. However, we're going to have bugs, but we're also going to have a bit of good moments as well. So we should expect that from iOS 12. We should expect that as iOS 12 comes along around the middle of next month.